Hi, I'm Charlotte, your podcast host for Conversation Jazz, a pod where we talk to professionals about their career journeys, giving you real insights and tips on how to get you where you want to be. I can't read without my glasses. I've got to that stage.
I'm at that stage.
You've been at that stage since I met you.
Yeah.
My next guest is a design leader at Deliveroo with over 30 years of experience of making digital products, managing and mentoring talent across a range of industries from travel to publishing, fashion to food. He's a dad of two and a denizen of London. He's Jason Beck. Welcome, Jason,
Hello.
to Conversation Jazz. Welcome to my garden.
It's a lovely garden. Welcome to my garden. It's completely real. It's not at all artificial. I'm not actually sitting in a booth in a London office overlooking the Thames. I'm in a forest.
The other view also sounds amazing, so thank you for joining me at this incredible time difference. Did you say you're in London CBD?
London, England. Yeah. Yeah, our office here is really lovely, actually. It's right on the Thames. Um, so we've got this fantastic big open kitchen, amazing views, little pods and booths you can sit in and, watch the river life go by while you're having your cup of tea.
Which is complete contrast to the fact that there's about 300 cockatoos in my background, all squawking. So if you can hear them in the background, um, it's not my crazy neighbours, it's birds. So I'll get right into it, Jason. I'd love to hear about your background.
Um, well, it's design. My background is exactly what I do right now. I've always been a designer from the day I was born. I've never done anything else, right? So, my education was a degree in corporate identity at Falmouth in Cornwall in England, many, 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 many years ago, and from that, I happened to get the sweet spot of graduating as the internet was taking off, or literally just starting as a viable industry. Um, and I happened by chance to do a 2-day HTML course at uni, which no one had heard of really, and nobody really wanted to do. It's completely voluntary. I think it was me and one other person that did it at the time. But then when I graduated and went back up to London to find a job, it was the thing to enable you to get into the workplace. So all these companies, brand new companies, that knew they could make money out of being in this thing called the internet, were looking for designers that could also write the code. At the time, it was like a magical mystery kind of
Unicorn.
skill set to have. And it hit at the right time for me. And I've been doing that ever since. Not the coding part. Let that go to more experienced and more clever people a long time ago. But from that, yeah, the very first job was in the design industry. And it's been the same ever since. They can't get rid of me.
I think, like, yeah, you're right. Like, back then, and even when I was starting out, there were jobs and they always seemed quite impossible because they were like, and website coder. And you're like, well, okay, I'm out of that one then. It was always quite hard to just do one skill set within the whole plethora of design skills.
I think when
Um,
you started, you were, obviously several years after me, and I think at that point, those skills had matured to the point where you'd had to be a specialist in one or
yeah,
other of those. So when I started, you were called a web designer because you designed the thing, usually in Photoshop. You cut the things out, made little GIFs and JPEGs, and then you wrote the code, basic HTML, and then later on some CSS. Um, and that's all you did. And to a large extent, you're also your own QA person, right? You kind of were a one man team, whereas now, of course, it's much much more matured. And you have like, a million people doing a million different jobs.
what first sparked your desire to design?
That's a really difficult question to ask, right? Because I was the kid at school that was always drawing pictures from the Beano, and uh,
For
you know,
our
I
Australian
really,
listeners, what is the Beano?
you don't have the Beano, you don't Dennis the Menace. The Beano's a very old comic that has been around the UK since, I don't know, probably the 50s. Um, and when I was very small, that was the comic that I read. Uh, and I used to copy all the little pictures, the cartoon characters. Um, and
Desperate
later
Dan.
on, and I was always, if you look talk to my mum, she said I was always in a corner somewhere with a pad of paper and some felt tips or some pencils, and that's what I did every day. And so it's odd to us what first got you into design. So I don't think I've ever done anything else actually. And I originally wanted to be an illustrator. And then as I got older, I learned there's this thing called commercial art where you can make money out of drawing essentially. Um, and then, yeah, I did art at school, then did another course, a BTech foundation course, um, and eventually landed this career post graduating from Falmouth in design. I've never known anything else. I'd probably be useless at anything else, to be perfectly honest.
Who were your mentors or maybe I'll start with who were your influencers back then? Like who did you really admire?
I think from a design perspective, I mean, we can talk about the professional ones, that like as you get into what design is or product design is, like the people like Dieter Rams, but I didn't know him personally. Um, I think the first person I can think of as a good mentor from my design career perspective was my tutor at university, um, Mark, surname I can't remember, but he was great. He was very patient, and he he took me under his wing a bit. I think I feel that he was, he paid quite close attention to what I was doing because I was doing slightly different. I was coding a website, which no one else on the course was doing. Um, and I found him and his previous industry experience really interesting to me because he was probably the first person I'd spoken to about he'd had a career as a designer and then gone into education, but his background was commercial, and I found that really interesting. So he was to pinpoint one person, maybe the first in a design capacity.
What work are you most proud of?
Gosh, I mean, apart from having two kids, obviously, the I will name drop here because, and anyone that knows me will probably roll their eyes, because I always say this when I start a new company. I was lucky enough to be the designer at HarperCollins Publishers when the Lord of the Rings films came out, and I designed the websites that went along with the films. So I had to work closely with the Tolkien estate. I had to work with Peter Jackson's team. I got shed loads of like amazing collateral and books and bits and pieces from working on that project. Um, we got in successive years invitations to the premieres in Leicester Square. So I'm proud of that work, but I think it was luck. I was at the right place at the right time. And there's been several other instances of things I'm proud of, but in terms of actual work, that's really kind of showy offy. If on another level, to expand the question, what am I most proud of? And you'll know this, right? Um, I became a manager and sort of team leader and mentor several years ago. I chose that path. So, I'm not an IC anymore. Um, I had to relearn Figma, for example, a couple of years ago. Um, I'm most proud of the people that I've brought through the system. I feel like I'm paying back a lot, especially now when I look back at my career and the people that I, hired in a junior capacity, even as an intern, right? Who
Say
I've,
no
who I've
names.
brought, who I've seen them grow in their career, and knowing that I gave them a good start and have been around to help steer their path. That is what I'm really, really proud of.
Is there anything in your career that you'd like to do that you haven't actually done yet?
That's a really good question. That's like an interview question. Um, do you know what? There was probably a point a few years ago when I thought, I should be at that top table, CDO somewhere. It's still quite a rare title to have actually. Get on that exec board, um, and really call the shots. But I think over the last few years, I'm really happy with where I am, actually. I don't necessarily want to be part of the exec team. I like being part of my team and being like closer to the work, and be part of the, creating a good culture with the people around me. That's what I'm doing. And I don't, it's something I haven't done yet that I want to do. No, not really. I want to speed up to retirement really and get on. I want to be on that like desert island somewhere. So no, I'm really happy with my career. I'm in a good spot at the moment in my life where I'm happy with how my career's been, happy for my life generally. Um, so yeah, no, that's a really boring answer. I wish there was something like, you know, I want to redesign Google or something like that, but it's not the case.
I love it. What are some of the mistakes you've made in your career and what have you learned from them?
I have made many mistakes. I mean, the only way to grow is, I think, you learn quicker when you're making mistakes. Um, I think, and we touched upon this before we started recording, but I haven't had a linear career path. There was never a plan to get to right to the top of the tree. Um, Mistake wise, I I don't update my portfolio, right? Um, and that's been an issue sometimes when I'm between jobs. Um, I think there are forks in the road, uh, and who knows what would happen if I took different paths. There are two distinct ones, I think, or one in particular. I was working for a travel company, um, and was there for several years. But there's one point, I think, halfway through when I had a chance to work for a company in Milan, and they flew me to Milan to interview with their founders. It's like two or three guys. They were starting a new social media company, um, and they needed a guy in London to effectively open their London office, and run things and build a team from there. And it would have been very exciting, and it would have meant flying to Italy often, every week or so. So these kind of quite glamorous commutes across from London to Milan, a lot of hard work and a lot of reward. It would have given me like tons of shares because I'd be next in after the founders. But at the time, and they offered me the job, but I turned it down because at the time I had two pretty young kids, and I just didn't want to fly, across to a different country every other week. So I probably turned down the chance of getting a heap load of cash fairly early on in my career, which would have put me on a completely different footing and really, drastically altered my career path. Um, but I think I make the right decision. I spent more time with my kids, and that's ultimately the most important thing at the time. But yeah, well, I think we all face those forks in the road, and who knows if it's a right or wrong decision. But that one always stands out to me as probably a big one.
Jason, thank you so much for your time. Really insightful answers. I think everyone can learn a thing or two from listening to this podcast today. What's really important is, like you said, learn about the foundations, get networking, find people in the industry. If you've got to where you are in your career, chances are you've got something to share. So thank you very much for your time, Jason. Really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. See you soon.
Thank you.